People living with dementia want people to know that they can not only survive, they can thrive. And the arts help them to do so.
Hi, Donna. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk with us here at Dementia Spring.
Thank you, Laura.
We want to take this time to learn a little bit about you, your background, how your art is impacting the dementia community. So first off, do you mind telling me a little bit about how you first became involved in dance therapy and movement therapy?
I became interested in becoming a dance therapist because I noticed that dance made me feel good. I was kind of troubled as a young woman, but whenever I danced, I felt good. So noticing that, I decided that I wanted to help other people also through dance. Most people who enjoy dancing, it makes them feel better. I mean, there are people who won't dance or they're afraid to dance. But let me just say that often if they have dementia, they no longer have that little button inside that says, oh, you can't dance.
That's great. I love that. That's a great point.
So it makes them less inhibited and more willing to dance and to play through movement. And for me, that's what dance is playing and expressing oneself through movement.
What kind of first drew you into working with the dementia community, and what inspired you to work with a community that could be more challenging, perhaps?
So I worked with people with dementia early in my career. I've been doing this for a very long time, over 40 years. And I didn't really have a preference for any population. People suffering don't have to do with diagnosis. It has much more to do with attitude. And that is something that comes from our early beginnings. So it's not necessarily the people with dementia are any more challenging than anyone else. I'm not sure who said it, but when you've met a person with dementia, you've met one person with dementia. It's really true of every diagnosis.
Sure.
And in some ways, it's like, well, how do I relate to a person whom I don't know very well? Someone who comes from another culture. And speaking of that, I want to say that if I know somebody comes from another culture, I'll play a song, an oldie song from their culture if I can find one.
Mm-hmm.
So bringing that music that may trigger somebody's memory of it, especially when it's somebody who speaks a different language and they're not used to being related to in that way.
Sure. Well, I mean, to your point about everybody being so different too, of course, but for your skills to have to be able to adjust and adapt to a group dynamic and respond to what might be happening over here and somebody else's needs on this end, I imagine that takes a lot of time and effort and skill and could change on a moment's notice, as with anything with this diagnosis could anyways. I can't imagine how it keeps you on your toes, literally, I bet.
Exactly, which is why I love doing it, because it's so enlivening. I have to be aware. I have to, pay attention. I have to be alive. And if I come in flat, it shows.
Mm-hmm.
I can say that early in my career, I thought, well, what am I doing this for? No two people are doing the same thing. They weren't dancing. They weren't following my directions, nothing. Why am I doing this? And as soon as I thought that, in some ways, I surrendered and I started paying attention to what they were doing as opposed to what they weren't doing. Wow. So noticing what they are doing, what they are capable of, is the beauty of what the arts languages offer.
Yeah. Well, that's a very powerful statement that you just made. I think that is truly the power of the arts, just to embrace all of our strengths, right? And allow that outlet, and especially for this community. What are some lessons that maybe you learned or surprises about working with the population, or maybe favorite little stories or moments that you shared with clients?
Well, I have to say I'm surprised almost all the time. And that's one of the joys. And basically, what I do is I offer an array of movement suggestions, props, colors, things that will motivate people to move, and then see what they respond to. And what they respond to, I then play with. So we're playing together. I think one of my favorite stories is a woman who was not somebody who benefited from bingo or trivia or games like that. It wasn't that she couldn't speak, but that wasn't where she was living. And she loved to move. Like at first she'd be hesitant, she'd be resistant, she wouldn't want to, but as soon as we got started, she would. And one day I had a parasol, and I was twirling the parasol and walking with my parasol and holding it over somebody's head. And then I gave it to her, and she got up and she did what I had done to all the other people in the group. So she spun it over their heads and she danced with them. And that was like such a joy, because people without that, she just sat or walked, but she didn't interact. But giving her that tool gave her the ability to play and to engage with other people, to show what was important to her. And both moving and people were important to her.
This is something for her to connect on, right? And that she was able to make that connection with you, and then take it one step further and bring it to the other residents that were part of the group as well. Is your typical model in working with a group of people living with dementia and caregivers? Like, can you describe what maybe the typical session might look like for you?
So I tend to structure my groups by using a playlist. So I create a playlist. I think about people in advance. Who is likely to be coming? How old are they? What's music that they might be familiar with from their adolescence? If I know that people have greater levels of dementia, I'm more likely to use songs that they can sing along to. I also, very early on, my theme is love.
I love that.
As I tell them, it's a lot easier to hate than it is to love. And so what we're doing here is creating a community of people who care about one another through movement. There's a ritual movement that we do at the beginning. The song is Can't Help Falling in Love with You by Elvis Presley. Some people were older when they knew that song, some people younger, but it doesn't matter. People know that song and they're able to hum if they can't sing. And humming is perfectly acceptable. And I let them know there's no wrong movements. So we start with a ritual that lets us know that we're moving for ourselves and for one another. We're here together, and love is important. After that, I often give them something called a ribbon wand. I offer them the choice of colors, because offering them choices is really important. It matters what color. Maybe they choose a color based on what they're wearing, or maybe they choose the color because they went to Dartmouth, and green and white were the colors of Dartmouth. So or if they're Irish, they choose green. It's very, very often. The only culture that I know of that has a color that's so strongly attached. Anyway, so using the ribbon wands, there's a lot of different movements. It's visual. It makes the movement that they're doing, even if it's little, it makes the movement visual. And so it makes them feel more effective and as though they're having an impact. Then I name the ways that I see them moving, and they may try those other movements or not. Another thing about how they're moving, some people may be moving slowly, some people moving quickly, in one direction or another direction, way up high, down low. So those are things that I can speak about, and it can help expand their movement. Expanding our movement helps us expand our emotions. And it gives us greater access to our memories as well. So one person, was reaching, and when she reached, she remembered that when she was young, she used to ride the carousel, and the carousel had a gold ring on it.
Wow. Okay.
So the act of moving helped her remember that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what I'm doing, I have no desire for any particular outcome other than that they be connected to themselves,
Mm-hmm.
their bodies, their memories.
Yeah.
That's really it. But after that, I begin to use other props like rhythm instruments.
Okay.
And so then they're connecting to their rhythm and maybe to the group rhythm. I tend to use music that's polyrhythmic at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So music, Afro-Caribbean music is great.
Okay.
Latin music that they can't sit still to.
Sure. Sure.
But at least they have to tap their fingers or their toes. And once
Mm-hmm.
they're doing that, if I name it, they'll do more.
Amazing. Wow.
And what I really want them to do is to move the spine. So I ask them if they can help me change the perception that people think of old people sitting on their porches and rocking chairs and maybe tapping their fingers, maybe tapping their toes, maybe moving their heads. And I said, I know we can do much more than that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move our spine. So, let's sway. So I get them to sway. This is where emotions live, is in the body.
Sure. Yeah.
So those kinds of things help them become more and more engaged, more of their bodies. And then we'll use a balloon because then they have to pay attention to one another.
Mm-hmm.
They have to be really alert. They don't want to get hit. So they have to, at least, and some people aren't responsive to music. We know that most people are, but not everyone.
Interesting.
So the balloon usually gets the other 5%. And besides, they love it. Everyone loves it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I noticed is they don't tap it, but what they really like to do is to smash it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we don't think of people with dementia as having a lot of energy and being aggressive. They like it. They like it a great deal.
Sure. Sure.
So that all of that helps release their energy, so they're more likely to say things spontaneously, something totally off topic, and I want that.
Sure. Sure.
I want whatever's on their mind to come into the session and help influence everyone. So I created a prop called an Octa-Band. It's similar to a parachute. So what I created has a center circle and legs that come off of it, and it's made out of spandex. So, and it also has a loop at the end for them to put their hand through. And when they pull, they can feel one another. They can feel they're connected to each other.
Okay.
They understand on a body level that we are connected.
Sure. Sure.
That's my goal.
So cool. And I love how it adds that connection and really makes it a physical feeling, right? It sounds like that each individual it's really tangible. I think also, reflecting back on what you were saying, part of your sessions too. I mean, you give people so many opportunities to not only express their emotions and to feel connected, but to be, empowered and to have an outlet and choice and control and things that sometimes can be really hard to find, especially within perhaps an assisted living or a nursing home setting. It sounds like you really bring that and allow that space for so many different opportunities, which is, I imagine, really wonderful. And you get to see that, all of that, the positivity that comes out of that.
I think people are understanding more and more that the arts are very helpful when it comes to people with dementia, because there's no wrong way to do things.
So on your website, you have like a caregiver guide of like communication and movement.
So it's called Dance of Interaction.
Yes.
Right. So I realized that there were times when I was able to communicate with somebody with dementia when the nursing staff weren't able to.
Mm-hmm.
There was a man who was sitting in front of the nurse's station, and his brow was furrowed. And I responded intuitively. So as a dance therapist, I'm responding from my body. I'm not responding from my mind. I'm not thinking, oh, what's the matter with him? Not at all. I'm just responding from my body. And I see his brow is furrowed, and it isn't usually. My hands are always cold. So I said, is it okay if I put my hands on your forehead? And I did. And the charge nurse said, oh my God, he's been sitting there for 2 hours, really agitated. She said, you put your hand on his forehead and his shoulders dropped. He's got a headache. He was not able to say it. I could see that something was bothering him. And so I just went to soothe him. So things like that. Or staff were perpetually coming up behind a person who was in a wheelchair, unlocking the wheels and taking off without speaking to them, without letting them know. If I asked them the question, they would always know that you never do that, but still they did it. Or if you work in a assisted living or nursing home, there's so much you have to do as a caregiver that you're always trying, you're moving quickly. But that's not a good pace for people who are living with dementia often, more often than not.
Sure.
So I decided to provide a training so that people could experience moving slowly and moving quickly.
Okay.
So one of the training guides that's in there, in partners, one person will be the person who's eating and the other person is doing the feeding. I'm not asking anybody to pretend they're a person with dementia. It could be a baby, it could be anybody.
Sure,
But
sure.
You're being fed and your pace is slow. And you're the person who's feeding them and you're spooning the food really quickly. Just do it, no words, no words. And what happens is the person who's being fed will close their eyes, will move away from the spoon, will turn their head away, will put their hand up. And the more that these things happen, the more the action becomes bigger because you're not paying attention to me. I'm speaking and you're not listening. So therefore, I have to make the message louder. A lot of the behaviors that are attributed to dementia are not due to dementia, it's due to the inability of the caregiver to communicate, to read the communication of the person who's living with dementia. But often people want to know, well, what is that person telling me? But it's not only that, it's what am I doing that may be contributing to the person's agitation?
Sure, sure. So a little bit ago, you mentioned how the arts and dementia, the arts really provides that, no failure space. Is there anything that you'd want to add to the importance of that intersection of arts and dementia?
That's a huge
question. Yeah.
Huge question because I think the arts are important for everyone. I think people, given what I see and how staff, family members respond to what I'm doing, I think they should be people who are living in some kind of, a residence other than their home should be offered dance on a daily basis, every day, because who knows what would happen if we did that. So that's about dance in particular.
Sure.
But I certainly think that's true of all of the arts or whatever of the arts, whichever of the arts the person is most responsive to. Why not?
Absolutely.
I am also, I'm a co-chair of the Dementia Action Alliance Arts Work Group. It's a place where people, if they can verbally express their thoughts and their ideas, their feelings, because they want people to know that they can thrive. People living with dementia want people to know that they can not only survive, they can thrive. And the arts help them to do so. We also have a Facebook page where people can put their art up and then other people can support them and just, like what they post or, really be engaged with one another and support one another around the arts.
Well, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. It is truly such a pleasure, and I'm in awe of everything that you're doing. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us here at Dementia Spring.